67 years ago tomorrow, on May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court made a decision that was to affect our country forever. The case was Brown versus the Board of Education. The lawyer was Thurgood Marshall, an extraordinary man. Thurgood Marshall was born Thurgood Marshall on July 2, 1908, in Baltimore, Maryland. He became tired of having his friends poke fun at his first name. At the age of 6, he legally changed his name to Thurgood. That was the beginning of his mission to change many things in the world that he did not like. Thurgood's mother was a kindergarten teacher. His father was an amateur writer who worked as a dining car waiter on a railroad. Later, he became a chief steward at a ritzy club. On Thurgood's father's day off, he would sometimes take his brother and him to court so they could watch the legal procedures. He told them to always stand up for their beliefs. Growing up in segregated Baltimore, Thurgood was aware of many racial injustices. The law said black and white people couldn't attend the same schools, play in the same parks, or even drink from the same drinking fountains. The laws were called Jim Crow laws. They were a collection of state and local statutes that legalized racial segregation. The name came from a black minstrel character, a white actor with blackface makeup who acted foolishly and sang songs that humiliated black people. These laws were meant to keep black people in their place. If black people attempted to fight against Jim Crow laws, we could be arrested, fined, receive a jail sentence, receive violent treatment, or even death. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Thurgood liked to fool around in school. He would be sent out of class and was forced to read the Constitution. When he graduated in 1925, he knew the U.S. Constitution backwards and forwards. Thurgood went to Lincoln University in Oxford, Pennsylvania, which was the black counterpart to Princeton. He joined the debate club, where he realized his passion for becoming a lawyer. He became more involved in civil rights. He graduated from college as a top-notch student in 1930. Because he was black, he was denied admission to the University of Maryland Law School. He decided to go to Howard University. There he learned about civil rights law. He began to think about the Constitution as a living document. As a member of the NAACP, Thurgood learned to defeat discrimination through the use of existing laws. He graduated in 1933 as valedictorian of his class. He returned to Baltimore. He worked in the NAACP with his mentor, Charles Houston, special counsel, to start planning how to overrule the separate but equal doctrine. When Houston retired, Thurgood became the special counsel and continuously worked toward his goal of challenging segregation in education. In 1950 and 51, lawsuits had been filed in Kansas, South Carolina, Virginia, Delaware, and D.C. on behalf of black children who attended legally segregated schools. The Supreme Court consolidated the 5 cases and used Topeka, Kansas resident Oliver Brown, one of the parents, as the name on the case. This was done on purpose so it would not look like a purely Southern case. In the field of education, Thurgood's cases had previously focused mostly on inequalities between black and white schools. Starting in 1950, however, he moved to dismantle segregation itself. Before the Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education, he argued that state-imposed segregation was inherently discriminatory and emotionally damaging. He cited several psychological studies, including one that found black children preferred white to brown-colored dolls. Even the U.S. Department of Justice filed a friend of the court brief that maintained separate but equal facilities were unconstitutional. After the Supreme Court ruled that school segregation was unconstitutional by unanimous vote, President Eisenhower was reluctant to use his presidential authority to enforce the decision. The Supreme Court provided no guidance on how to actually implement desegregation. Because of this, some Southerners used all of the delay tactics at their disposal to avoid integrating schools. Some states even closed certain public schools. By early 1964, only about 1% of black children in the South attended schools with whites. Those that did were constantly harassed. It was not until the latter part of the 60s that desegregation efforts were in full force. Though the Supreme Court's decision didn't achieve school desegregation on its own, the ruling and the steadfast resistance to it fueled the civil rights movement in the United States. Today, 67 years later, there are still ongoing discussions of how to combat racial inequalities in the nation's school systems, mostly based on residential patterns and differences in resources between wealthier and economically disadvantaged districts across the country. Mr. Marshall worked for the NAACP for 20 years. He was chosen for a judge on the Court of Appeals. He was asked to be the Solicitor General. Finally, he became the first African American Supreme Court Justice. He held that position for almost 24 years. Mr. Thurgood Marshall, a.k.a. Mr. Civil Rights, a.k.a. Supreme Court Justice, thank you for all that you did for us. Rest in power. We are Black history.